UFOs Cosmic Top Secret. Quote, "It is a fraud for the US government to pretend that it is not interested in UFOs. In fact, it has been a matter of high and probably preeminent interest for decades." End quote. Paul Hellyer, former Canadian Minister of National Defense. "Eppur si muove" is an Italian phrase meaning, quote, "and yet it moves," end quote, famously uttered by the Italian mathematician, physicist, and philosopher Galileo Galilei, after being forced to recant in 1683 before the Inquisition his belief that the Earth moves around the sun. Galileo asked the priest during his trial to look through the telescope, but they refused because they knew they would see something that they did not want to accept. It would seem the same is true with UFO today. We can offer a definition of UFOs that you may find useful when you study the subject. A UFO is the reported sighting of an object or light seen in the sky or on land whose appearance, trajectory, lights, and colors do not have a logical, conventional, or natural explanation, and which cannot be explained not only by the original witness, but by scientists or technological experts who try to make a common sense identification after examining the evidence. UFOologists and private UFO organizations such as MUFON are found throughout the United States. Since biblical times, humans have witnessed and recorded strange manifestations in the sky and speculated on the possibilities of visitors from another world. Today, the airline pilots of the world, from the skies of California to the fields of Kansas to the rice paddies of the Orient, have regularly and persistently reported sightings of unidentified flying objects, which are also called flying saucers. UFOs are real if you read the case reports from ordinary citizens and thousands of flight and military personnel. There are over 12,000 case files that have been reported to the U.S. Air Force from 1947 to 1968. Of those, 701 are still classified as true unknowns. While ET observation and interaction with Earth is probably an ancient phenomenon as opposed to a purely modern occurrence, the marked increase in activity coinciding with World War II and the dawning of the nuclear age indicates that ETs are quite concerned about this transitional stage of human social evolution. They are particularly worried about human nuclear weapon technology and its potential for worldwide destruction, and possibly for its potential threat to ETs, although this is minimal. Some benevolent ETs beings are greatly interested in our peaceful transition to a world society, international peace, and the establishment of a just, effective, and representative world government. ET technology is strictly guarded by both ETs and human governmental agencies because of its potential for military applications which would greatly threaten world security. It is imperative to the benevolent ETs that this technology not gain significant human applications until such a time as the Earth attains international peace and an effective world government free from corruption. The US government, at least at the level of a highly compartmentalized above top secret group, has known about the reality of UFOs and their occupants since at least 1947. A strict secrecy and a worldwide cover-up of these facts has been maintained because there is a fear of public panic and social disruption if this information is known, reminiscent of the hysteria caused in 1938 when Orson Welles broadcast a phony alien invasion story. Of course, there are major security issues surrounding possible military and technological applications of ET hardware, especially during of a world beset with Cold War tensions and competing interests. Most people are true believers. According to a report by the United Nations, since 1947, over 150 million people have been witnesses to UFO sightings throughout the world. More than 20,000 of those have been documented landings. Even if we can discount 90% as misperception or hoaxes, that leaves far too many incredible events documented times over by high-ranking government and military officials. Consider also the careful research of countless engineers and scientists who say the evidence is irrefutable and who logically attribute to our alien counterparts the same kind of careful, sophisticated, efficient, high-tech exploration, especially those who likely are far more advanced. In addition, the contact reported and objects sighted range from little floating orbs the size of a baseball to enormous light spacecrafts bigger than an aircraft carrier. So there are countless manifestations of alien activity in addition to the more common flying discs. At the beginning of the 21st century, the overwhelming majority of Americans reported they believe that UFOs are real and that these crafts are most likely guided by intelligent beings from other worlds or dimensions. A Roper poll conducted in the USA reported that over 70% of the population believes that the government is not telling the public everything it knows about UFOs and extraterrestrials. 1 in 12 Americans claim to have personally seen a UFO, and this belief is formulated with no prompting whatsoever by the US government. Are that many of us unbalanced to believe this? Is this the greatest mythology of all time stirring within us? Or is this an awareness of a collective unconscious memory surfacing? To claim, as some people do, that there is no evidence suggestive of intelligent extraterrestrial life visiting our planet simply belies the facts. The deniers include the many branches of the US military, the media, and government-funded science programs such as NASA and Fermi Labs. UFO sightings are global in nature, especially since there are too many hard-censored data points to ignore, plus literally millions of eyewitnesses. It is only through ignorance or pumpistry that evidence exists. The mainstream scientific community also remains uninterested in and of the question of the reality of UFOs or the possibility of intelligent extraterrestrial life visiting Earth. This is in spite of scientists and astronomers discovering billions of new, potentially uninhabitable planets and never before seen solar systems, documenting new exotic life forms on Earth that thrive in extreme environments previously thought to be uninhabitable, and uncover tantalizing hints of life on at least 10 planetary bodies within our own solar system. Yet for reasons which we shall attempt to resolve, mainstream scientists continue to mock and deride those who take the phenomenon. Contrary to popular accounts in the mainstream media and many scholarly articles on UFOs, the phenomenon is frequently reported by scientists, military personnel, police officers, as well as commercial and private airplane pilots. There have been literally millions of sightings in over 100 countries around the world. Jimmy Carter claims to have seen a UFO before he became president. Also, contrary to popular belief, UFO reports are not limited to rural areas or confined to the United States. The phenomenon has been reported in about 150 nations and over major metropolitan areas in America, the UK, the former Soviet Union, Germany, France, Spain, and all the Scandinavian countries, China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, throughout Africa and Central and South America, and at both the North and South poles. In Hesdalen, Norway, there are so many UFO sightings that a permanent webcam has been set up with amazing results. UFOs have also been reported repeatedly over civilian and military nuclear facilities, at military bases in the US and worldwide, above and beneath the surface of the Earth's oceans, and outside the Earth's atmosphere. All kinds of people see UFOs. Does not matter whether you are rich or poor, educated or uneducated, young or old. In fact, most people who report seeing UFOs were not even looking for them when they had their sighting. The chances for seeing a UFO are greater for those people who live in small towns or in the country and are outside late at night. Even though most have never seen a UFO, some say that seeing one when they were children or young adults sparked their interest in UFOs. Many UFO researchers argue that UFOs have appeared throughout history. There are many myths, legends, and stories that tell of strange things seen in the sky or beings that came from above to help humans develop civilization. Because modern scholars cannot directly check the facts of these stories, it is impossible to determine if these are accurate reports of true events. Caution should be taken when evaluating many UFO news items. Readers are encouraged to investigate and research information pertaining to UFOs on an individual basis so they can draw their own conclusions. But let's be honest. If the only strange things seen in the sky were a few oddly moving lights or some specks glinting in the sun, there would be no UFO question. If there were no human abductions or cattle mutilations, there would be no inquiry. But there have been many close observations of these strange objects, along with firsthand experiences. Plus, physical traces of various kinds have been left behind, and witnesses have experienced physical and medical effects, including injury, implants, and death. If we can narrow down all of the reported sightings to between 5 and 25%, depending on the sample, then even this is enough to warrant expert examination. Even 1% would deserve attention. And the disturbing truth is that the USA and UK governments have been complicit with a certain minority group of malevolent ETs, enabling them to do harmful things to people and animals, all the while hushing up their presence in a tangled web of secret agreements run amok. Cosmic Secret. For those who believe there is validity in the UFO phenomenon, the study of UFOs can be broken up into four primary groups. First are those who firmly believe the phenomenon involves alien beings from other star systems. The second, although declining in popularity, are those who feel UFO sightings are an effect of the human mind, perhaps summoning up deep ancestral memories and expression of our longing for wholeness, as Carl described the phenomenon. Carl Jung published his 1959 book, Flying Saucers, predicting, "We are nearing the great change." There is a third camp who claim all UFOs are exclusively human-constructed, highly advanced flying crafts based on Tesla technology, produced entirely by the black operations of the secret government. Finally, there is a growing faction of those who think the crafts are the result of time or dimensional travel, or that they arrive from another universe, which is coexisting simultaneously with ours within the so-called multiverse. With 200 billion known galaxies, ours is but one universe in a much wider entity encompassing millions or billions of other universes in the multiverse, each with varying physical laws, sizes, and dimensional foundations. The US government, and particularly CIA and NSA intelligence departments, have demonstrated time and again that they will go to extreme lengths to cover up the issue. The US intelligence agencies, along with our NATO partners, classify anything UFO or ET related as cosmic top secret. The idea that the CIA has secretly concealed its research regarding UFOs has been a major theme of research since the modern UFO phenomenon emerged in the late 1940s. More top secret than the H-bomb. Penalties for disclosing classified information concerning extraterrestrials have always been quite severe. In December 1953, the Joint Chiefs of Staff issued Army, Navy, Air Force publication number 146 that made the unauthorized release of information concerning UFOs a crime under the Espionage Act, punishable by up to 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. A strange policy for a phenomenon the US government maintains never existed. The following passage describes the official secrecy policy adopted in April 1954, during the time frame when President Eisenhower was making ET contact. Quote, "Any encounter with entities known to be of extraterrestrial origin is to be considered to be a matter of national security and therefore classified top secret. Under no circumstances is the general public or the public press to learn of the existence of these entities." The official government policy is that such creatures do not exist and that no agency of the federal government is now engaged in any study of extraterrestrials or their artifacts. Any deviation from this stated policy is absolutely. On July 11th, 1934, the first treaty between the small grays from the Orion star system, who are approximately a meter tall with large wraparound eyes, and the US federal government under President Franklin Delano Roosevelt occurred aboard a Navy ship at the port city of Balboa, Panama. This was one of the most important events in human history because it thrust us into a role we were not prepared for, namely becoming hosts to a highly unpredictable, seemingly malevolent extraterrestrial race. The intent was to renew the treaty every 10 years, and in 1944, it was quickly passed because the US was still fighting in World War II. The Greys said they would provide advanced technology in exchange for being allowed to conduct genetic experiments. From the start, the Americans, they would only agree to the terms if a list of abductees was provided to the government and the abductees returned unharmed with their memories of the event erased. The Greys provided anti-gravity devices, metals and alloys, free energy, and medical technology in return for allowing them to operate on their own terms. Unbeknownst to the Americans at the time, they would also infiltrate human society on all levels. In addition, they began to replace important world leaders with clones under their control. This information, when understood only by a select few, was kept on a strictly need-to-know basis within the government and secret services. These were the select few officials, some believe, who basically sold out the human race. First and second presidential meetings. About 2 decades later, after the first military contact in Panama during FDR's administration, a sitting U.S. president made the first known face-to-face meeting with living ETs. During the evening and early hours of February 21st, 1954, while on vacation in Palm Springs, California, President Dwight D. Eisenhower went missing and allegedly was taken to nearby Muroc Airfield, later renamed Edwards Air Force Base, for a secret. He reappeared the next morning at a church service in Los Angeles. Reporters were told that he had to have emergency dental treatment the previous evening and had visited a local dentist. The dentist later appeared at a function that evening and presented himself to reporters as the doctor who had treated Eisenhower. The missing night and morning have subsequently fueled rumors that Eisenhower was using the alleged dental visit as a cover story for an extraordinary event. The event is possibly the most significant that any American president could have conducted, an alleged first contact presidential meeting with extraterrestrials at Muroc, and the beginning of a series of meetings with different extraterrestrial races. Another important meeting had occurred a few months earlier with extraterrestrials who had a distinctive Nordic appearance, also called the Tall Whites. Researcher William Cooper and others note that the first contact with the Tall Whites took place at Homestead Air Base in Florida, but Ike was not present. They look so similar to us that they could have passed for humans had they been wearing heavy clothes and sunglasses. But upon closer examination, they were quite different, having larger and differently colored eyes, very white skin, and platinum blonde hair. They were called the Etherians and allowed Air Force officials to inspect 5 craft which they arrived for the prearranged meeting. This benevolent ET group warned us against harmful aliens that were then orbiting above the equator. plus offered to help humankind with our collective spiritual development. They demanded that we dismantle and destroy our nuclear weapons as the major condition for their assistance. They refused to exchange technology, citing that we were spiritually unable to handle the technology which we already possessed. They believed that we would use any new technology to destroy each other. This race stated that we were on a path of self-destruction, and we must stop killing each other, stop polluting the earth, stop raping the earth's natural resources, and learn to live in harmony. These terms were met with extreme suspicion, especially the major condition of nuclear disarmament. Military top brass believed that the condition of disarmament would leave us helpless in the face of an obvious, malevolent alien threat. We also had nothing in history to help us with the decision. Nuclear disarmament was not considered to be within the best interests of the United States. The overtures were rejected. About a year later, on February 11th, 1955, at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, President Eisenhower had a second contact meeting with ETs, which lasted for about 45 minutes. What was intriguing about the incident was that the president was able to sneak away from 30 or so reporters while on a bird hunting expedition near Thomasville, Georgia, during a period of high international tension with China over Formosa, now called Taiwan. After Ike's arrival at Holloman on the Columbine 3 aircraft, 2 UFOs flew over the flight line and one landed near the plane. Ike then went aboard a saucer-shaped craft to meet with the Greys. This led to an eventual re-signing of a technology sharing agreement now called the Grenada Treaty, sometimes spelled the Grenada Treaty. Under the Eisenhower administration, a third 10-year treaty extension with the Greys and the US government was signed, now under a new name. These ETs, whom Ike met with, were the same race that crashed at Roswell 7.5 years earlier. They stated that their planet was dying and they needed a safe quarter on Earth to conduct genetic experiments which would help them and the race to survive. It was speculated that they reproduced by cloning themselves, and this technique lacked genetic variety and had weakened them over eons of time. A secure base was to be provided for them in exchange for certain advanced technology that the aliens agreed to share with the military. Grenada Treaty gone bad. After Eisenhower decided to ally with the Greys, a joint ET-US military underground base was started in Nevada at a remote location in the Nellis Air Force Base. The area was designated S4, about 10 kilometers south of Area 51, known as Dreamland. It would not be the only underground base, as a faculty below Dulce, New Mexico, was also constructed for their quarters at this time. The intent of the Grenada Treaty was that alien technology was to be traded for permission to engage in human abductions and cattle mutilations for their research purposes. Before fully siding with the Greys, the motivation of each extraterrestrial race was considered by the military brass, who were involved in these treaty discussions. They opted for secrecy and acquiring advanced technology over the spiritual development of the human race. In exchange for the transfer of advanced technology, the Greys were again given permission to abduct humans on a limited basis for the purpose of medical examinations and monitoring. These living tissue samples had something vital to do with their own genetic experiments for survival of their species. Since their knowledge of biology seems so far beyond our own comprehension, their motives were never adequately explained. The stipulation was that the humans would never be harmed, would be safely returned to their point of abduction, and that the humans would have no traumatic memories of the event. Also, the aliens would provide a detailed list of all abductees to a special group called MJ-12, who would monitor their compliance. Although the National Security Council had an agreement with the big-nosed Greys, as they were called, the reptoids would provide a periodic list of abductees to MJ-12, the original top secret panel tasked to interface with all things pertaining to UFOs and ETs. Within a short time, it became obvious to Eisenhower administration that these Greys had broken the Grenada Treaty and were abducting far more people than they had reported, including large numbers of children. Some never returned. Horrified by the betrayal of the big-nosed Greys, the government further suppressed any public knowledge of the aliens, realizing their own culpability for their betrayal of humanity. As Colonel Philip Corso revealed in his book, The Day After Roswell, quote, "Hide the truth and the truth becomes your enemy. Disclose the truth and it becomes your weapon," end quote. The regressive reptoids knew their presence on Earth would be covered up at all costs, so they could treat us without accountability. An assessment was made and it was determined that the U.S. Armed Forces lacked the resources to fight them, and so it was decided that the military should continue the agreement, even though it had already been violated, and to focus on exploiting the relationship with the Greys to gain even more advanced technology. The Ultra Unit was one of the most elite and super secret programs of the National Security Council. It became the NSA faction later in time and was originally run by Project Paperclip Nazis who were part of the NSC after 1945. All Ultra members were cloned humans. Although there are several ET labs in America and the UK, the best known US Grey base is underneath the Indian Ute Reservation near Dulce, New Mexico. It is supposedly devoted to interspecies genetic engineering on the lowest levels, and humans are no longer allowed to enter. If caught, they are immediately killed. Funding the black operations. A multi-billion tax dollar secret fund was organized and maintained by the military office of the White House by order of President Eisenhower, ostensibly to build secret underground bunkers for the President and Congress in case of military attacks. Later, when much more funding was needed, the appropriations were supplied by black projects contained in the defense budget and not subject to review. Justification on the part of the USA for funding these black projects was that we have gained backward engineered high technology, sometimes with major military advantage. The best example is stealth aircraft, which utilize ET metals, skins, coatings, and residues that are also used on other aircraft and submarines. There are lasers that can melt through rock using extreme heat vitrification, which are used to tunnel an extensive network of train tubes and create the underground bases. We now have infrared satellites that can see through walls, Kevlar, Velcro, transistors, and titanium, all items backward engineered from alien technology. Today, over $500 billion per year must be spent to maintain the black ops. By some estimates, the black budget consists of 1/4 of the GNP of the USA. Much of the black ops budget is used to create at least 129 deep underground bases built since the 1940s. Mach 2 electric trains connect each of these, and each base usually has multiple levels. The Dulce base, for example, has 4 kilometers deep. Located here is the underground alien biogenetic base, where malevolent aliens need unseen quarters to conduct their experiments. For allowing their cover, the Greys have been given the Black Ops anti-gravity technology, advanced computer technology, biological warfare technology, advanced genetic sciences, quantum technology, genome medicine, and much more. In an ironic twist of fate, we are reminded of the $2.3 trillion reported missing from the Pentagon budget by then Secretary Donald Rumsfeld on September 10th, 2001, the day before 2 planes took out 3 buildings in New York City. The ironic twist of fate is that all of the documentation of the missing trillions was stored in the ill-fated Building 7 at the World Trade Center, and a missile struck the Pentagon, where an audit was underway. After 9/11, this missing fund was never mentioned again. Take the John Lear test. John Lear, son of the Learjet founder, has an impressive resume. He is a former Lockheed L-1011 captain who flew over 150 test aircraft and held 18 world flight speed records. During the late 1960s, 1970s, and early 1980s, he was a contract pilot for the CIA. John Lear developed a close relationship with CIA Director William Colby, who was in charge of covert operations in Vietnam before becoming the DCI, that CIA Director. Lear was an accomplished pilot, had inside connections with the CIA, and knew many influential politicians and high-technology aerospace contractors. After he became a UFO whistleblower, he devised a test that would take on his name. The John Lear test goes like this. As a world leader, you'd have a chance to make a fully truthful presentation of all the knowledge of ET technology that the USA has. If fully aware of all the pros and cons, would you choose to disclose? You'd have to consider the assumption that some people would go berserk. Would it also mean the end of organized religion? Would society collapse? Maybe it would take down the government, disturb the world, or even the universe. Could you personally bear the consequences of disclosure? Quote, take John Lear's word as gospel if you want to take the test, end quote, suggested Art Bell, former host of Coast to Coast, who remarked that he personally would not disclose after taking the John Lear test. What is also at stake is the possibility that reality may be far more complex than our modern scientific notions of space, time, and matter currently allows. Mystics might be quite pleased with of reality exist, but for a civilization built around commerce and technology entirely grounded in physical reality, the news of other realms beyond our own comprehension or higher intelligences who might be manipulating us could be quite disruptive. The shock for our collective reality could lead to chaos. This justifiable fear is the primary rationale for the new century-long secrecy. Outspoken Canadian. Wilbert Smith was an employee, a senior minister at the Canadian Department of Transport. As a trusted colleague, he wrote a top-secret memorandum to the Controller of Communications, dated November 21st, 1950, asking permission to set up a group to study the geomagnetic aspects of UFO propulsion systems. As part of his memorandum, Smith said that he had made discreet inquiries through the Canadian Embassy staff in Washington, D.C., where he obtained the following information. Quote, A, the matter is the most highly classified subject in the United States government, rating higher even than the H-bomb. B, flying saucers exist. C, their modus operandi is unknown, but a concentrated effort is being made by a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush. D, the entire matter is considered by the U.S. authorities to be of tremendous significance, end quote. He also noted that Dr. Vannevar Bush, one of America's preeminent scientists, along with a team of experts he had assembled, was already backward engineering UFOs by 1950. They were interested in the combined art and science of analyzing recovered objects, in this case, parts of a crashed vehicle, in order to determine its characteristics for possible replication or adaptation. Outspoken astronaut. While working with a camera crew supervising flight testing of advanced aircrafts at Edwards Air Force Base in California, the camera crew filmed the landing of a strange disc. Outspoken astronaut. While working with a camera crew supervising flight testing of an aircraft at Edwards Air Force Base, California, the camera crew filmed the landing of a strange disc object that flew in over their heads and landed on a dry lake nearby. As camera crewmen approached the saucer, it rose up above the area and flew off at a speed faster than any known aircraft. NASA astronaut L. Gordon Cooper was with this group and observed firsthand both UFOs in flight and extraterrestrials. In his words, quote, while flying with several other USAF pilots over Germany in 1957, we sighted numerous radiant flying discs above us. We couldn't tell how high they were. We couldn't get anywhere near their altitude, end quote. Astronaut Cooper recounted the first time he encountered ETs close up. Quote, I was furthermore a witness to an extraordinary phenomenon here on this planet Earth. It happened a few months ago in Florida. There I saw with my own eyes a defined area of ground being consumed with flames, with 4 indentations left by a flying object, which had descended in the middle of a field. Beings had left the craft, there were other traces to prove this. They seemed to have studied topography, they had collected soil samples, and eventually they returned to where they had come from, disappearing at enormous speed. And to know that authority did just about everything to keep this incident from the press and TV, in fear of a panicky reaction from the public. End quote. Smaller nations used to be in lockstep, aware of alien encounters since at least the Roswell crash. President Truman created the National Security Agency, the NSA, in 1952, with the original goal of deciphering alien language and establishing communication. The NSA is even more secretive than the CIA, and both have influence over NASA and NATO. One of the conditions the U.S. Secret Service makes upon other countries that receive financial aid is that any information pertaining to ETs or UFOs must remain concealed. When Ronald Reagan was president, he ordered that no person or country doing any kind of business with the US government could discuss UFOs. Reagan deeply classified everything pertaining to UFOs. Nobody who did any work with the government was allowed to talk about the subject, even if they worked with unclassified material. In recent decades, military and government officials outside the US have come to the conclusion that UFO disclosure would not necessarily compromise national security, nor would it pose a threat to citizens. For this reason, many countries of the world have broken from US policy and have started to make surprising revelations. Official pronouncements state that UFOs are real. The governments of Belgium, France, Brazil, UK, Russia, Italy, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, New Zealand, Canada, Uruguay, and Australia have opened a portion of their UFO files to the citizens of their countries. Unfortunately, the US government shows no sign of backing down from its position of complete denial, even as other governments around the world are disclosing more and more information. The US government continues to cover up evidence by denying eyewitness accounts, confiscating military records and video footage, and suppressing information from people who claim to have direct contact with ETs or compelling photographic evidence of UFOs. A common tactic is to provide alternative explanations. They frequently point to swamp gases, light aberrations, atmospheric phenomenon, weather balloons, misidentified aircraft, and hoaxes. For example, in January of 2008, dozens of witnesses reported seeing a UFO in Stephenville, Texas. Despite sincere and detailed witness accounts, the military discounted the entire event, pointing to optical illusions and superior mirages. A logical question is, what does the US government have at stake in the UFO issue, and what it could stand to lose if there was worldwide disclosure? Hacking Cosmic Top Secret. The British system administrator, Gary McKinnon, who gained access to 97 US military and NASA websites in the early 2000s, has been a top UFO folk hero of sorts. He intended to find top secret files regarding free energy, but stumbled upon something much bigger. McKinnon claimed to have uncovered a spreadsheet containing names and information about non-terrestrial officers and transfers between fleets. He cross-referenced those names with a database of all U.S. Navy and military personnel, but was unable to find any of the officers. McKinnon therefore concluded they were not of this world and labeled them as Space Marines. It was not before he was caught. After admitting his actions, McKinnon was originally given a 6-month community service penalty in his home country. This ballooned into a 60 to 70-year prison sentence and millions of dollars in fines if he would be extradited to the USA, but extradition was eventually denied by the UK. Musical artists Sir Bob Geldof, David Gilmour, and Chrissie Hynde have recorded music to prevent the extradition of McKinnon to the United States. An undisclosed military source reportedly said that they were concerned about what else McKinnon might have seen in his wanderings around the world, but maybe has not yet disclosed or divulged that information to WikiLeaks. This begs the question, why pursue this man with such a heavy hand who fell for a hoax set up for some reason on unsecured military computers if there is no such thing as UFOs? McKinnon had heard that the Johnson Space Center Building 8 had people erasing, airbrushing, and manipulating evidence of UFOs from high-resolution satellite images. He found his way into the computers at Building 8 and located the file folders. They were named RAW and edited, and he was able to download large images in NASA's proprietary graphic format. He saw a huge cigar-shaped object with geodesic domes at its ends, with no sign of riveting or other manufacturing. The photo was apparently taken from a satellite looking down onto the alien object. Was it ours or theirs? He was disconnected before he could save the image, and Gary was subsequently tracked down and arrested by the British High-Tech Crime Unit. Although threatened with extradition, in reality, he did them a favor by showing how pitiful their security systems were. He also did the rest of us a favor. He exposed U.S. Navy Space Command's Solar Warden program. It is clear now that NASA can be seen as merely a cover for the real space program. Still paying the price of secrecy. The extent of the treaty mistake was greatly underestimated. Not only do the disturbing abductions and the hybrid program continue to this day, but the research and development of alien technology has been exploited almost exclusively for defense contractors and kept secret. Some in the military have expressed uncertainty and mistrust regarding ET motives and their ultimate intentions. There is already embarrassment and consternation over the human military inability to secure world airspace from repeated UFO penetrations. Add to this the embarrassment resulting from disclosures concerning how this matter has been handled, such as the harassment and ridicule of whistleblowing civilians or military personnel, and the withholding of vital information from the public and Congress. With each continuation treaty with the Greys, the secret government within the military-industrial complex, that's MEIC, is becoming more and more advanced and insidious. There are now select groups of humans who are living lives literally thousands of years more advanced than the Earth's civilian population. These people are described as a breakaway civilization. For every 1 year that goes by since the start of these treaties in 1934, military technology advances by 44 years. Every now and then, the public gets a new computer or some other piece of technology from the MIEC, but these are just little trinkets comparable to when the early white settlers gave beads to the Indians. Nothing of real importance, such as interstellar craft or free energy, is divulged. Granted, we were given microcircuits, semiconductors, and exotic elements, but the real technological benefits were seized by defense contractors to make miniaturized atomic bombs and other weapons of mass destruction. The advances in biology are applied to biological warfare and may have resulted in some of the retroviruses or Morgellons that are currently perplexing biologists. But the main benefits, namely the technology associated with the UFO propulsion systems and free energy generators, are the real gifts that the people of Earth are denied knowledge of and not allowed to utilize. The powers that be that the benevolent technologies would transform our civilization almost overnight, particularly related to energy sources. Free energy alone would shuffle the balance of resources and power with more directed to the Earth's population. In the last few decades, there have been a few brave whistleblowers and some who have made the ultimate sacrifice. Dulce underground base whistleblower Phil Schneider was first tortured, then strangled to death by catheter tubing in his Portland, Oregon apartment in January 1996. William Cooper was shot to death by deputies outside his Arizona home in November 2001. There are many others who have revealed their secrets and then have disappeared without a trace. Others retracted their stories and never spoke out again, and on it goes. Newly declassified government files on UFOs seen in the UK from 1985 to 2007 reveal that the Ministry of Defense, the MOD, the UK equivalent to the Pentagon, did not make much effort over the years to investigate these strange sightings that continued to be reported. BBC News quoted National Archives consultant David Clark as saying, quote, "One of the most interesting documents in the files is a piece from an intelligence officer who basically says that despite thousands of reports they've received since the Second World War, they've never done any study or spent any money or time on the subject. And they say that people just won't believe that when they find out," end quote. The people in charge, those who have the responsibility for disclosure, apparently do not care to share any of this information on UFOs with anyone for their own reasons. And on it goes. Backed into a corner. How would US citizens react to the knowledge that tens of trillions of dollars have been spent on unauthorized, secret, and unconstitutional projects over the decades. And that these taxpayer dollars have been used by corporate partners in total secrecy to develop spin-off technologies based on the study of ET objects, which were later patented and used in highly profitable technologies. Not only have the taxpayers been defrauded, they have also paid a premium for such breakthroughs, which were the result of research funded by their tax dollars. Advanced technologies, which have been identified from the study of these anti-gravity vehicles, once disclosed, will replace the currently used forms of energy generation and propulsion. Fossil fuels, nuclear energy, and airplane transportation will become obsolete. Free energy technologies will enable the Earth to attain a sustainable civilization without pollution, energy shortages, or global warming. These technologies are already fully operational. They have been developed within super secret, unacknowledged special access projects. In short, the definitive solution to the world's energy, pollution, and poverty problems exists within compartmentalized projects that need a planned disclosure and relevant legislation. The program controlling these issues continue to operate outside of legally required congressional oversight. Even recent presidents have been left out of the loop, deliberately deceived, and denied full access. Therefore, urgent action is needed on the part of Congress, the White House, and other institutions to obtain the necessary oversight and control of these operations to ensure that these now classified technologies are announced for world cooperative energy generation and propulsion. The secrecy is about much more than an exotic propulsion system back engineered from a flying saucer. It is about the control of energy production. Fuel is something that just about everyone in the world needs, because the military-industrial extraterrestrial complex controls these discoveries, and because of their error that resulted in abductions and potential displacement of humanity by hybrids, this remains the most secret information on the planet. This controller elite includes terrestrial governments, including members of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches in the USA, media organizations, influential international organizations, and military and intelligence organizations that may be populated by hybrid clones or implanted humans under the command and control of the reptilian faction whose intent may be to take over the earth. And they know we, the people, are powerless to stop them, or they believe that we are. The sheer audacity of making these unreal claims is their greatest protection. Who could possibly believe this most esoteric of all claims? And what is it that they possess that the controllers want more than anything? We'll see in the next chapter.